Welcome to the Five Rivers podcast. I'm Dr. Sumeet Arora. I'm a American board certified pediatric endocrinologist. I'm working at a tertiary care center and leading the division in that department of pediatric endocrinology in India. I have a very special guest here today, Amber, and she is an excellent person. She is a fitness expert, a nutrition coach with a 17 years long history of training a lot of people from all age groups from 8 years to 80 years. And I will let Amber introduce herself. She is also a mother of five, and she's currently doing her master's in public health. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, definitely love being in the fitness industry. Like you said, I have started studying my master's in public health. Just want to take it a little bit further with diving into a little bit more behavior changes in people and just understanding a little bit more statistics on certain things in my community.
That's amazing. I would actually would be very interested to know how did you start your journey with fitness? What
Um,
is it that
so
motivated you?
So fitness, it's so many areas where I can say that that got me started. Um, I can say, well, I've always been active. Always been active. I played basketball. I cheered. Um, then I had my first child and my second child. I think when it was my second child, that's when I found out like I had gestational diabetes. I was on the borderline of it and had to make some changes. But after I had my third child is when I really got the biggest, and it was hard for me to like deal with being this overweight. So once I had my son back in 2011, just was trying to find my way to see, where I wanted to do with my career. I was staying in Japan at the time, and
Mm.
so, being a stay-at-home mom at that time, it was like, what can I do? And fitness is something that has always been a part of my life. And the other moms used to ask me, what would I do beforehand, and how some way that I lost some weight. So I just got into fitness, and it just pretty much stuck with me. I guess another story is me having such a bad health history in my family made me not want to follow into those same patterns. So that kind of got me going too as well.
That's very inspiring. And I would definitely say that you look fantastic. You don't look
Oh,
like you
thank
are a
you.
mother of five and you've had that long history of, some health issues as well. You look fantastic.
Thank
So,
you. So I do want to clarify, I gave birth to three and I have a bonus of two kids. So I got remarried. So that's where the five comes in at.
well, whatever. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like he is also like some hard work that you've done there.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay, great, great. Okay. Okay. So, Amber, you did mention something about your family history. Could you just elaborate that and probably for our listeners and for me to understand, like, if you can tell us and expand a little more about your family?
Yes. So being African American, um, my family in particular, as well as I found out as other friends, their family, we deal with high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, and then of course, that leads to other chronic illnesses. So pretty big on the diabetes and high blood pressure.
Hmm. So when you say family, would you want to expand on like how many members in the family and how many of them are like close relatives or close family members that have that?
So far as I can remember, I know that my grandmother dealt with diabetes, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol.
Hmm.
And that's mostly on my dad's side of the family. I have a couple of uncles that deal with diabetes, just being overweight.
Hmm.
So it's my uncles. I have like four of them,
Hmm.
a couple of cousins, aunties, and it's mainly on my father's side that has these chronic illnesses.
Right. So that's quite a significant family history. And then, that's what is known also, like in terms of African Americans being at a very high risk of developing type 2 diabetes and, heart diseases, high blood pressure. And, whatever the literature says, it's like a 60% increased risk of all these conditions. So maybe we could dive deep into, like, what are the factors that go into putting African Americans at a higher risk of getting these conditions. There are a lot of large studies that are out there looking at genetics, looking at geographical region where they stay, like the cultural aspect of it, the socioeconomic status of it, and so maybe we could step by step look into like what are the factors that are going into this. Um, so yeah.
So, far as my father's side, that they have been the community is definitely, when we're talking about socioeconomics, is not the best. They didn't have the access to more fresh goods. I do remember like growing up and like we cooked, but it was always heavy foods, fried foods in particular. Like, I hate to say it, but it is, fried chicken. We
Hmm.
always had either fried pork chops was a big staple too, which
Hmm.
is, of course, not the best source of protein. And then even when we cook like our collard greens, they will cook it in ham hocks, instead of something a little bit more healthier.
Hmm.
And then stuff like the restaurants around in the neighborhood, it was just all catered to like fast food restaurants. It wasn't anything that will give us a better food option.
Hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like being an Indian, as Indians, we are also at a higher risk. We're actually considered, the thin fat risk factor that we have. From an African American standpoint, that now that you're mentioning the socioeconomic aspect of it, there are a lot of factors that go into this, like the availability of the food that is out there, which is financially sustainable for a lot of people, is mostly those McDonald's, KFC, and all these, like burgers, pizzas. And so
Yeah.
it's they're much more cheaper than vegetables, they're much more cheaper than fruits that we go out there and buy from grocery stores. So that plays a very, very big role into like what we're eating, and what we're getting from outside is just all these high fat, high trans fat rich, high salt intake type of foods, and that is definitely putting us at a higher risk of diabetes and high blood pressure, like you mentioned. But how about the other aspects? So if you're cooking at home, if financial issues are not a concern, what do you think would go into the cultural aspect of cooking that would put someone at risk? When I say someone, like African Americans at risk of getting type 2 diabetes.
Um, Different factors that can play a part into this is the educational.
Hmm.
So not knowing what to cook or how to cook something else a better way is just something that is a missing aspect in the community too. It's like we are culturally like, hey, this is how we prepare this food and there's no other way, or it just doesn't taste right. And
Hmm.
and it's the education, it's let's see, some other factors in there. And I just had it was on the tip of my tongue.
So Amber, tell me this, that if with change in the financial stability of a lot of people, how has there been a change in the way that they eat? Is it still the same, or like has there been a shift in the way we're eating now?
So I feel like if there's a change in the financial stability, most people will move into a better neighborhood. When you move into a better neighborhood, you have more access to different resources, better grocery stores, healthier food options to eat as well. So financially, it definitely plays a huge part in being able to change like their diets and how they
Hmm.
cook and prepare their foods for their families.
Right. And so like the way they're eating, is it still the same, like in terms of the what they're cooking at home? Is it still, related to what they were eating in the past, or has there been a change in that as well?
Well, from this is my personal beliefs. I feel like once you come out of a certain environment, you get exposed to different types of healthier options. So instead of like using ham hocks, me personally, I have switched over to using more of like turkey necks to cook with my collard greens. Being exposed to different cultures are is it becomes more accessible to you versus being back into that same community when you don't have the financial stability.
Hmm.
More stability in the finances. I feel like the more exposure you get to everything else.
Cool. Um, and that's very good to know because, a lot of times, like, we're stuck in that cultural aspect of it that, it's just the culture, it's just the culture, but also it has to do with, access to a lot of different options. And like you mentioned, like mixing with different cultures and getting the option of eating other food items as well. So great. Okay, so Amber, like you mentioned that, poor resources or lack of resources does limit our ability to buy foods that are healthier. So what are the other options that we can go for? Like instead of eating a McDonald, what is something that you would suggest, which would be much healthier, even in those limited resources?
So in those limited resources, me personally, I know I used to stay in a community where I didn't have these vast various resources. So personally, I made it a way to go out to these stores that are more healthier and obtain like healthier ingredients. But if I couldn't, I would definitely use my phone and like Google like what are the different options. So I would say my kids, they did crave, like they wanted a McDonald's fish sandwich. So
Hmm.
what did I do? I end up Googling a recipe, like, all right, let's see how can I prepare it because I just know that it's more ingredients and chemicals if we went to McDonald's. So we end up going to the store, buying the cod. Yes, we fried it, but it's a healthier option than going to the McDonald's. So just going in and trying to find a recipe that will, you know, imitate that craving that you have, that would be my biggest recommendation is just trying to make it a little bit healthier or prepare it at home instead of going out and grabbing it.
Thank you, thank you. This is really helpful. Can we have a few more examples? I'm really liking the idea of like talking about like what we can switch. Maybe one or two more
Yeah.
examples. Um,
Let's see another example. Um, Man, I just really feel like people have to be more health conscious of what they're eating. Um, like in our community, I can't think of anything right now on the top of my head. But
so
as far as
what I used to recommend. So I saw one of my faculty members, what they used to do is like whenever like there was a party and there was like pizza or McDonald's being ordered from outside, what she would do is she would not eat the bread and she would only eat the chicken
mm,
and the lettuce from inside. So you're actually taking
smart.
away 60 gram of carbs, and you're
Yeah,
just eating mostly the chicken and maybe it's still breaded.
vegetable.
It's still breaded when you're talking about the chicken patty, but at least the
Yeah,
bread part is gone and she's eating the lettuce, and sometimes, yeah,
yeah,
maybe there's a salad, she would eat that. So I mean, that's one way, especially if you have diabetes, it really helps by taking away that 60 gram of carbs.
yeah.
um yeah.
I like
um
that. I like that idea.
yeah, I was actually surprised that oh, that bread is gone. But then it makes sense, like if you're trying to manage your weight, I mean, there we probably just have to find out how to not waste the food. But then yes, like how do we tell them, or maybe like get those flat breads rather than the bigger thicker buns of the burger. And then of course the swapping from sugar containing beverages to something else, maybe just plain
Yeah.
water, would be one
Or
thing that.
sparkling flavored water.
Right, yeah, yeah. Great.
Hmm.
These are some great tips that really
I
really
guess I
work.
have another one. Since you brought it
Okay,
up,
yeah,
I would just say try to make sure I tell my clients to just eat protein. Like
yeah.
focus on just eating the meat. Like find the meat first because of course it's going to be more satiating to us and that way you'll get more full and that way you won't crave anything else, but eat the meat first.
Right. And I mean, that's in our terminology, we do call it meal order and sequence. So,
Hmm.
we eat the chicken, eat the meat first. I mean, I prefer to tell all my patients that white meat is something we should go for, or fish, but then eat your fiber and then eat your bread. So that does help with the glucose spikes as well. But yes,
Yeah.
that's a very, very good point and well taken tip, and
Yeah.
really helps. Yes, yes. So Amber, let's just talk a little bit about how stress plays a bigger part in African Americans in the contribution towards diabetes.
Yeah, so stress is a big thing. Stress, we all stress. So if somebody tells me that they're not stressing, they pretty much are lying. So, when it comes to stress in African Americans, those who are not financially stable or in an underserved community, we're dealing with the stress of making sure that our bills are getting paid, making sure that the kids are in school, food on the table. Um, it's just a plethora of things that we are, dealing with. You even dealing with maybe single parents, in the household trying to manage both roles of a parent. Um, and then that just spills over to work and then in the health.
Yeah, those are some very big factors that you mentioned. Those are like survival factors. And of
Hmm.
course, that, does play a big role in stress. And stress does spill over into management of diabetes. And it becomes very challenging when the degree of stress is so high, it will affect the glucose levels. So tell me a little bit about tips onto how you would, even in these difficult to manage situations, how would you cope up, and how would your suggestions would be to, like, help with that.
Yeah, so coming from a fitness background and my clients are stressed, I will always try to tell them at least go out and get some fresh air. Just take like a 5 or 10 minute walk to at least decompress and just get the central nervous system back down to relaxing. If that isn't possible, even try to just take a few minutes and just breathe. Breathing is very meditative and can again calm down the central nervous system. And I always say, hey, at least try to see if we can pick up some weights because lifting weights definitely was therapeutic for me when I was stressful at one point of my life.
Hmm. So that's a very important factor. So I think, like, not only the factors that you're talking about in the scientific world itself, when we go out, that action itself, going out in fresh air, um, does help to calm the mind significantly. And when you talk about breathing, when we are saying breathe, sometimes we don't realize how passively we're doing it, and we're
Hmm.
realizing we're doing it in a much faster rhythm. When we slow down that breath and consciously breathe, it does activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and it does help to release the nerves, and has a very calming effect on the mind, and does help with the glucose levels tremendously. So yes, Amber, those seem to be very simple tips, but they're, the most effective tips
Yeah.
in managing diabetes. Yes, and managing an overall stress management, they work well. um, let's talk about sleep a little bit. So,
Okay.
there are a lot of factors in sleep itself: the quality of sleep, the duration of
Hmm.
sleep, and how restful we are when we're sleeping. So those factors, if you can touch upon, and how the community itself is affected by it.
Sleep. Whew. Again, parents are, stressed, then you might have to put down the kids. So sleep is definitely a big thing as in the fitness is recovery. Like the recovery part is important because I've noticed that when my clients don't get enough sleep, cravings start to happen. Hormones start to get out of whack, as you probably know a little bit more into detail. But that stress, the lack of sleep then bleeds over to the next day and creates more stress, and it's just like a never-ending cycle. So I would try to at least tell my clients to like find a routine. If you can't find a routine, find something that you'll do every night. Like for me personally, I like to have a nice cup of hot tea before I go to bed, just so it can just soothe and calm me down. And then in those days that I can't get to my tea, or if it's not working, I like to take some magnesium to at least
Hmm.
calm my nerves down.
Wow. Yeah, and then you are doing fitness. I think exercise itself is a very big factor that helps regulate the sleep rhythm itself. So when you're exhausted, your muscles are exhausted, you tend to sleep sooner and faster, and you don't. It does help with stress, and so the sleep onset is actually quicker. So I think your role is a very big role in sleep management as well. So yeah, and then a lot of people also suffer from what's called sleep apnea. So
Yeah.
the fat around the neck, it actually leads to obstruction of the airway when people are going into deep sleep. So they're not able to get into deep sleep, and as soon as they do, the because of the obstructed airway, they sleep breaks. They gasp for air and they wake up, and then they start to go back into the sleep. So all night these pauses happen, and then they ultimately affect the overall sleep quality. Daytime sleepiness increases, and the concentration during the day is also affected. So once the weight is lost and once the fat around the neck is reduced, this sleep apnea symptoms reduce tremendously. So it's
Mm.
very important that people who are experiencing that get themselves tested for it, because yes, weight loss helps, but then if they are having severe sleep apnea, then they may require certain um, uh, technology like BiPAP machines to keep the airway open so that the sleep quality is improved, and ultimately that also helps with diabetes management. um,
Yeah, this is good because I tell my clients like, "Oh, how did you sleep today? Like, how was your recovery? Or, sleep, how much did you sleep?" And they'll tell me like 6 to 8 hours. And with you saying the deep sleep is important, I don't think that most people understand like it's not how much, it's the quality of sleep that you get, which is important. And that's when the recovery process really starts to take place in the
right.
body.
Absolutely, absolutely.